Mary Dross, you're the convener of Planning Backlash.
That's right, yes.
And Planning Backlash organised this debate tonight.
Yes, we actually initiated it right here in Deacon Edge when Robert Doyle was speaking. I challenged him to debate Kelvin Thomson. He said yes, he would. So here we are, months later, here we are.
Well done. How many different suburbs and organisations does Planning Backlash represent?
Well, we've got about, I say, 250 plus groups.
That many?
Yes.
And they're all concerned about population growth?
They're all concerned about what population is doing to us because we're being overdeveloped and overcrowded. We're not having the say over our areas the way we should have because we go to VCAT and they get approval for some awful development that we don't want.
And do you feel that normally you get enough of a voice or you should have more of a voice?
No, actually, what I'm saying is who asked us if we want to be as big as this? And I think it's time we started to call for a referendum.
What a great idea.
Let the people have a say. Because
Fantastic.
more and more people, I find, are now saying, we don't want this. We're overcrowded. Our roads are overcrowded. Our public transport's overcrowded. Our hospitals are overcrowded. Our schools are overcrowded. The courts are overcrowded. We, the people, have never been asked what we think about such a big increase in population. It's time we had a referendum to let the people have a say. That's democracy.
And what caused you to come to this debate? Do you have a particular interest or concern about population growth?
Yes. It's basically come about from having observed what's been happening in Melbourne for the past 10-15 years. One thing that struck me is that the rapid population growth is causing issues. And obviously the government has the potential to control growth through immigration. And I've come here I understand Kelvin's position, but I wanted to see what arguments Robert Doyle had and whether he had anything new to offer from the arguments that I've heard before.
He didn't appear to be acknowledging that it's actually population engineering by the state and federal governments. It's not some natural increase in Victoria.
Yes. Well, he did point out natural increase, which may be true, but the immigration also compounds onto that. So in terms of control, we can control who comes into the country, and that will help. The one thing I found different between the two arguments is both of them acknowledge that population is an issue. Kelvin proposed a solution which we could actually enact. Robert Doyle talked about smart growth, but we haven't actually seen any plans for smart growth, nor seen any benefits from so-called smart growth that's been put into place at the moment. We haven't got any freeways where it takes less time to get past than it did in the past. House prices aren't going down, Melbourne's not getting any less crowded. So in terms of solution, I thought only one person actually had a solid solution. And even if it's not a complete solution, at least it would help alleviate and take pressure off Melbourne.
What did you think of the proposal for a referendum on population growth?
I think we should have a referendum, and I can tell you exactly what these outcome will be. Any online poll shows that most Australians are in favour of reducing our net immigration intake.
Would you like to say anything else?
Yes, there was another point that Robert Doyle made about migration. My grandparents came here from Europe in the 1950s, my dad from Europe in 1977. My grandparents were able to offer my dad a better quality of life, and my dad was able to offer me a better quality of life. I'm concerned that I can't do that for my daughter. I can't possibly hope to afford the kind of house my dad was able to get, even though he was less educated than me. Nor could I support a family on one wage as he was able to. And it's not just me, but a lot of other people. I've had friends who have had to move overseas due to increasing house prices. So quality of life is deteriorating. And aside from the cafes and trees, what's really important is being able to secure a place for yourself, having a stable residence, having a stable society, and that's getting harder and harder. And definitely population growth is one of the biggest, not the only factor, but one of the biggest factors, and the one we should address and be honest about. And we need to be honest that it's not inevitable. We're doing it because we've got a property market that we need to prop up. There are developers who believe that they have to be able to sell every unit that they build, and we've got to bring in people to bring in that demand. It's a big Ponzi scheme. It's got nothing to do with prosperity. It's just to keep the Australian economy afloat because it's just so dependent on residential real estate, and we've got nothing else.
You felt that the Lord Mayor was making more of a sales pitch than actually addressing the problem. He's a man with a job to do. What were some of the questions you would have liked to have asked him?
What specific plans does he have, or notions does he have, in order to create smart growth in Victoria? He talked about it but never actually elucidated what that smart growth was, apart from developing along corridors. But we know that's not happening in the suburb that I live in, which isn't along a transport corridor. There's a lot of subdivision going on, and obviously the density is increasing. In order to have smart growth, we have to put a stop to that. What plans does the government have to stop subdivision? What plans do they have to stop urban sprawl? If it's in the property developer's interest to do that, how are they going to go against them and restrict development to these corridors? I don't see it workable, and I don't see any proposal to do such.
You mentioned that in the last election you talked to some Liberals about what plans they might have to provide smart growth and deal with population growth, which they advocate.
I think the Liberal philosophy is in a free market, and the government's responsibility is to not interfere with the market but to allow it to do its thing. I asked some members of the Liberal Party during the last election what they would do about housing affordability, and they essentially said nothing. It's not the government's job to tackle the issue, that's what the market is and that's how it has to be. And I got the same sense from Robert Doyle today. But in terms of population growth, it's not the government's job to interfere. Reading between the lines as to what he was saying, that seemed to be the message that was coming across. It's inevitable, but it's only inevitable because it's my philosophy that it's not the government's position to actually put a cap in.
Or it's his job.
It's his job. So essentially his job is to allow whatever happens, and whether it is for the benefit or for the detriment to the people, that's something the people have to learn to deal with.
What made you come here? Why did you think it was important? Did anything like democracy bother you?
Where does one start? Population is a root or the contributor factor to all issues, and the fact that it's been so under rug swept, I finally was thrilled at the opportunity for both sides of the debate to actually hit it head on for a change.
What did you think of the debate?
Aside from my own personal bias, that Kelvin Thomson gave a lot of facts and inconvenient truths, and Robert Doyle was nothing but a series of platitudes and feel-good sound bites, and someone who can't seem to do his maths either.
My name's Mark. I live in Melbourne. I've lived here for a couple of years now. I'm here today at this debate because I'm concerned about suburban sprawl, and I'm concerned about the quality of life in Melbourne being depleted by population growth. I think that while population is growing too quickly at the moment, and this worries me somewhat because our planning system is not very sustainable. It's a planning system based around suburban sprawl and rather hastily built concrete apartment blocks at the moment. So the infrastructure is struggling to keep up. So I would like to see Melbourne's population grow at a much slower rate so that we can look after our agricultural land, look after our biodiversity, and preserve the character of the inner city suburbs as well. Because I think in years to come we will greatly regret the development spree that's going on at the moment. I think that politicians generally ignore the issue, and I know that many people in Australia would be concerned if they realised the full extent of the population growth. And I know that when Kevin Rudd made his Big Australia statement, they did surveys at the time. A lot of Australians said they weren't in favour of Big Australia, yet none of the political parties seem to be tackling this issue, and in fact I notice in the media it seems to be repressed as well. So it's important for forums like this to take place, and debates like this to take place, to try and bring it back into the public eye.
Thank you.
I'm Jenny Wharf, and I ran the Blue Wedges campaign opposing channel deepening in Port Phillip Bay, and I'm now concerned about the Western Port Bay port expansion, and I've realised that all of these environmental issues like port expansion and our suburban expansions is all to do with population growth. So that's why I'm here tonight, to try and hear some reasoned arguments as to why we don't need to keep relying on population growth and Ponzi scheme economy to keep ourselves afloat.
Do you think that all points of view on population growth are well represented in the ordinary media?
No, of course not. The ordinary media, Murdoch press in particular, is obviously lined up very heavily with the development industry and the growthists in general, and so no, the mainstream media is in the pocket of developers and growthists, and spend a lot of time denigrating people who want to have a reasoned argument about population.
Thank you very much, Jenny.
My name's Richard.
Yes?
Richard Cook. I just made some notes on the speech. I like the fact that both of them, from both sides, agreed that we should have a referendum on population, which was good. Good to see a bit of consensus. So coming from a science background, scientists are notorious for wanting a solution to their problems, even if that's not always possible. So I think maybe Robert Doyle believes that there is no solution to population increase, and he sort of focused on the fact that somebody brought up unlimited growth, and I think in this case to say that's unlimited growth, that's plainly a ridiculous solution, but he basically used Socrates' method to destroy the idea, because the whole argument that something could be unlimited was ridiculous. If he had been a bit more fair to the argument, he would have perhaps said growth that is too high is effectively unlimited, and in a real context, growth can also be too high for what is, for want of a better word, acceptable.
Well, the Carlton Residents Association has been around since the 1960s, and we've been involved with many issues over the years. So-called slum clearance in Carlton was the initial one for the public housing estates. Then, of course, the F19, the Eastern Freeway, major developments through the northern suburbs. And, of course, that goes on. It's continuing the expansion of Melbourne University into Parkville and Carlton. And, of course, now the East-West Link and the constant pressure for development. So the Carlton Residents Association has about 400 members. We have a very active committee. We run about a dozen different reference groups. The one I head is to do with traffic and transport, others to do with development, public parkland. Of course, we have the only World Heritage Site in Victoria, the Royal Exhibition Buildings and Carlton Gardens, and that, of course, is a constant battle from our group, trying to retain that.
Not much democracy left.
There is
Do you
not.
think there was more in the 1950s or 60s?
Well, I think there was the population was less, so the pressures were less. But somehow
Did you
we
have
seem...
more of a voice then
Well,
too? Because
I'm not sure we had more of a voice, but there was less pressure.
Yeah.
I think now, because the pressures are so great, the lack of a voice is much more evident.
I'm Clifford Hayes. I'm from planning Backlash, this event, and we've got tonight a big debate on Melbourne's population and whether we should be growing at the rate we are. It's a discussion that really needs to be had for the future of Melbourne and its infrastructure. We're lagging seriously behind in infrastructure costs, and meanwhile we're just adding more and more population. We've got development breaking out in all sorts of areas. We've got sprawl, we've got high rise, we've got little apartment blocks taking up what used to be family homes, and it just doesn't seem to end anywhere. So we've got people that are proposing more and more population growth, and we've also got people that are seriously concerned about population growth in the environment.
And do you think those people have a voice normally?
I think the pro-population growth voice is much larger, and we don't have a serious exchange of ideas very often.